highest waterfall within the city limits. On the show today we have Conservancy Counts. It's a program that was a recent presentation at the Richland Area Retired Educators RARIA group. From speakers who are from the lacrosse-based Mississippi Valley Conservancy. The presenters are Communication Director Sarah Bratnober and Stewardship Coordinator Connor Cote. Previewing their presentation was RARIA member Marilyn Lofthout on why she entered into a conservation easement on her 193-acre Fancy Creek Llama Farm in North Richland County.
So the inspirational seed for today came from the January 2023 local and state press release about our very own member, Marilyn Lofthout, having entered what is called a conservation easement with the Mississippi Valley Conservancy of her beautiful 993-acre Fancy Creek Llama Farm north of Richland Center. I thought when I read that, now here is a program, and with the kind cooperation of our lacrosse guests and Marilyn, today is that day, so thank you very much for attending. I've asked Marilyn to provide our words of wisdom as a program preview by answering this one question: why I did it. That's her speaking, why I did it. For the sake of time, because Dewey wants us to eat, I would ask you to hold your questions for Marilyn until the program's Q&A period, which they will have. So then you can ask Marilyn some questions, so jot it down. Marilyn is our living example of our quote of the day by Rachel Carson and Gaylord Nelson. The ultimate test of a man's conscience may be his willingness to sacrifice something today for future generations whose words of thanks will not be heard. Ladies and gentlemen, Marilyn Lofthout.
Will you help me with the microphone in case I get tangled up in it?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
don't trip over the cord.
I won't.
I don't want to have you hobble.
Okay, can I waste my things?
Yeah,
Can I put
as
that-
long as you
As long as I don't touch.
as long as you don't
any
touch any buttons.
As long as I don't touch any.
Or Connor will be up there to fix it.
Okay, okay. Tell me if this is that right, Jean? Does it sound normal? Does it sound normal? Anything but normal. Right, right. Yeah, why did I do it? I mean, that sounds like a really unusual question. What was it? Anyway, my husband and I, my late husband and I, had talked about the future of our farm. And so this is, even though this is happening after his passing, we had talked about it. So I'm sure that wherever he is pleased with what's happening here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I did it. There are over 40 land conservancies in Wisconsin, which is really unbelievable. I didn't even understand that, but I did look it up on the internet. So in our area, there are two main conservancies, I would say. The Mississippi Valley Conservancy, which is located in the La Crosse area. I think that's where your headquarters are. And also the Driftless Conservancy. And the headquarters for that is in Dodgeville, on the main street in Dodgeville. The main street is sort of like the main street in Richland Center. Anyway, two conservancies are readily available, and I know people are involved with the Driftless Conservancy. David Kapitsky is one. and Paul Cloudder. Both my husband and I did not grow up on a farm. He was a townie, I was a townie. I grew up in a small town in Illinois, and I lived all of my working life in a town, in a city. Not only, I started out teaching in Kenosha, moved to Arlington Heights in Cook County, and taught there until I moved to Richland County. No, I moved to Sauk County, because I got picked up for speeding in Sauk County. I remember that. Anyway, Ken and I got married in 1978, and at that time we moved out to the farm, the place where I still live. His parents had a clothing store in Richland Center, and he lived in Richland Center his entire working life. Then he went away to the Army, came back, and he had to buy 2 acres of land from his father. And his father, being a good businessman, he made Ken pay every cent of that 2 acres. But that's where the house remained. And he had a hard time rehabbing the house because there were groundhogs living in it. But he played the radio really loud, and it drove the groundhogs away. The actually living on a farm was quite a different experience for both of us. But we grew into it very well. And Ken had always taken interest in the farm. His father had grown up on a farm. And that's why his father, Nelson Sherman Houck, purchased farms and raised ponies. But he also raised cattle as well. So our farm, the Conservancy farm, is made up of 3 farms put together. Dr. Charles Bowen was Kent's grandfather. He purchased the first farm across on Highway 56. Again, in the middle, on the shores of Fancy Creek. And on the other side of that stream was the Lee farm and also the Hansberry farm. And Kent's father purchased those farms when the opportunity arose. And so the 993 acres are made up of those 3 farms. That's how it came about. I had nothing to do with it. But here I am with the Conservancy, and I feel obligated to Dr. Charles Bowen and his wife, and I feel obligated to Nelson Houck and Alice Houck, Alice Bowen Houck, she was a Bowen, and to Kent for taking care of this land. When I wasn't around, they took care of it because we were part of the Farm Service Agency, part of the Managed Forest Agents program, and just recently, I'm going to say recently because it's in the last 6 years, I was driving along from Madison back to the farm and listening to public radio. There was a program on there by the Wisconsin Wetland Association that just rang a bell with me because with my walking, I walk every day with my dogs. I walk from my house down almost to Highway 80. Round trip is like about 3 miles. I walked that, and I was always looking at Fancy Creek, and I could see the old oxbows that were, some of them were still there, and there's still water in them. But it wasn't connected to the ditch. In 1947, there was a ditching process that tried to straighten Fancy Creek out to prevent flooding. All it did was create a pipeline. It was like a fire hose because the water came rushing down there and carrying the topsoil away. So I thought, why not contact the Wisconsin Wetlands? So I did. And they came out and looked at it, and they just about were flattened because the Houck Farm owns 1 mile of Fancy Creek on both sides of the creek, which is rare. We don't have any neighbors to have to deal with and stuff on either side, because it's us. So we have been working on a project for about 5 years, organizing, gathering together the engineering, whether it's with a drone or people actually out on the wetland walking. There's a host of amphibians and other animals that live there. We are close, very close to having the funding to actually do it. To put the stream back in the old oxbows, it will prevent a lot of flooding. So that is part of the attraction, I think, one of the facets for the Conservancy, because the Conservancy is still private land, and I have, whoops, whoa, I did something badly. I have this little sign. These signs will go up around the land. It is still private property, and I'm hoping it will help prevent.
Your private property.
It's my private
That's
property,
right.
because I still own it. I can actually sell the land, but and that's all figured out. I'd be happy to talk to you about it, but we don't have time this morning. But actually, I'm really happy with these little signs, and we talked about the signs. So I'm mainly thinking in terms of giving honor to my husband, to his parents, and to his grandparents for keeping this land whole and in a state where it can be a real nice added part to Wisconsin. And believe it or not, Abby Church, who has helped me a great deal with the Conservancy, walked the entire property. And actually, there was a survey done too that is an absolute fabulous survey. There are orchids on the farm. There's one orchid called the three-bird orchid. Little tiny guy. I didn't know there were orchids on the farm. There are black-billed and yellow-billed cuckoos. That isn't surprising. A little bit of cuckoo. But anyway, and a lot of different kinds of animals. I'm really interested in reptiles and salamanders and stuff like that, and I'd like to know what kind of inhabitants we have that are salamanders, and even snakes. I'm kind of interested in them as well. But a lot of interest and so little time. You know, it's really, really unbelievable. So I'm really, really happy to see all of you here. And if you have questions, be sure to get my email address, talk to me, and I will encourage you to do whatever you can to help protect our planet. Thanks so much. Enjoy Connor and Sarah.
Marilyn, thank you very much. So, protecting the Driftless area of Buffalo, Crawford, Grant, Jackson, La Crosse, Monroe, Richland, Trempealeau, and Vernon counties. Since 1997, the Mississippi Valley Conservancy, based in La Crosse, Wisconsin, has a mission to conserve native habitats and farmlands in the Driftless area for the health and well-being of current and future generations. For the next 30 minutes or so, we have the great privilege today to hear from two of the Conservancy's leaders, Sarah Bratnober, got it, okay, Communications Director, and Connor Cody, Stewardship Coordinator, to tell us just how that mission is done and what we may be able to do to help, because, Raria, Conservancy counts. Let's welcome Sarah and Connor.
Thank you. Well, we are delighted to be here today. We're excited to share information with you about what we do as a nonprofit land trust, about some of our recent work here in Richland County, and about how we can work together to save the driftless for them. Some of the beloved wildlife species that depend upon habitats here in the driftless area, and important roles that they play in our entire ecosystem. They keep us fed and watered. And we're also saving the driftless for them, the next generation of people who will inherit our land and the values that we attach to it. So, again, I'm Sarah Bratnober, and I'm here today with Connor Cody from Mississippi Valley Conservancy. And I'm going to give you some general background information on what a land trust does and what Mississippi Valley Conservancy does. And then I'm going to turn it over to Connor to share information about recent projects right here in Richland County, including Maryland's fantastic farm. So for more than 25 years now, actually last year was our 25th anniversary, we've been celebrating some important milestones, and we attribute our success to the many supporters who share our values in protecting these things: abundant wildlife, clean water, fresh and local food, local economy, and community health. These are all things supported by our mission. And for the first 25 years, we permanently protected more than 25,000 acres in that 9-county area that Paul mentioned. And in keeping with our climate action plan, we prioritize these projects. We actually have a waiting list of people that want us to conserve their land legally, and we'll tell you more about how that works. But and the way that we choose which projects to take on does relate to our climate action plan, and that involves choosing projects that are in priority areas. We've defined a lot of those are watersheds, and also protecting projects and land that are connected to already protected land. And in that way, we build corridors of land. Wildlife need the freedom to move about. You can't tell a woodpecker that the next oak tree is 15 miles over that way. They need room to move about, and that's also a way for them to find refuge in a time of climate change. So while we humans figure out how to reduce our use of fossil fuels, land conservation offers immediate results by trapping and storing carbon dioxide and mitigating the effects of extreme weather events, such as flooding that Marilyn mentioned, and I'm sure you all experienced in Richland Center. There was flooding, and this area is prone to flooding. And erosion, and these challenges that we all face in this area as a result of a change in climate and extreme weather. You can see a little picture there of our climate action plan, and there are copies on the back table, and you can help yourself to copies of that if you're interested. It's also on our website where you can download it. So I'm going to tell you about 4 things that we do. There are legal aspects and complications and details in all of the work, but it boils down to really 4 main things that we do. And the biggest of those is protecting privately owned land. There are some misconceptions sometimes that once we protect land, it belongs to us or something like that, and that is not the case. So the privately owned land that we protect can be homesteads, it can be recreational land that maybe someone who doesn't even live here owns, and it can be farmlands. And most of the land we protect is privately owned, about 19,000 acres. And we protect it with a tool called a conservation easement. It's a voluntary agreement between a landowner and a land trust. And Maryland's conservation easement is a good example. So the conservation easement gives the landowner assurance that the land will never be subdivided, never be developed, never be mined. And even if they choose to sell it or give it to someone else, anyone that wants their name on the title for that property must also agree to the terms that Marilyn outlined for her land. The landowner gets a lot of say in what can and cannot happen on the land. So it's really a mutual agreement where we try to conserve the natural resources on the land by defining certain areas of the land that can be used for this or not. So that's probably the biggest thing we do. We probably spend 60% of our time protecting privately owned land. And then we protect public lands, and I think this is where sometimes it's confusing because they are very different, but they're still protected by us. Although owning land is not our top priority, there are situations where a special place needs to be protected. And because of maybe a very sensitive habitat or some very important natural feature or community. And so when these places need to be cared for and protected, we sometimes go to the extreme of actually acquiring them. And that acquisition process often requires funds from partners and foundations and communities. A great example is the La Crosse Blufflands. That was a huge partnership between the city of La Crosse and Mississippi Valley Conservancy and the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund of the state of Wisconsin. So very complicated, but partners working together to make these things happen. So we call these properties our nature preserves. And we currently protect, we protect 25 of them. And we protect some of them in partnership with communities. As I mentioned, the La Crosse Blufflands is a good example. We actually transferred the ownership of the La Crosse Blufflands to the city of La Crosse, but we still legally protect the land so that the city can't decide to put a big housing complex on top of the bluffs, for example. We prevent that from happening. But we're partners in taking care of that land. So that's the public lands. Another big thing that we do is restoring native wildlife habitats. And that happens both on the public lands and to the degree that we can, we also help the landowners with easements to accomplish their habitat restoration goals. So, and this is because owning land is really just the first step as far as conservation goes. Our land management team, together with interns and volunteers, works year-round to restore native habitats for the wildlife and other ecological benefits that come from supporting the native plants and the native wildlife that have a symbiotic way of caring for the land together. And much of that work is done on the lands we own. Oh, and as I mentioned, some of it is done for the landowners with the easements. And last but not least is our educational outreach work, like having the time to come and talk to you today. We think of our nature preserves as outdoor classrooms, and we promote them to schools and organizations for educational and recreation. 24/7, 365, they're there for you and anyone that wants to go there. Our educational outreach also includes ongoing community involvement and connecting landowners with resources too, providing educational services to landowners too. They didn't all grow up on farms, right, Marilyn? So now I'm going to hand things over to Connor, who's going to share information about our work in Richland County.
Thank you, Sarah. So now that we have covered a little bit about what we do and who we are, I'd like to share some stories from our recent work here in Richland County. Our 9-county service area was officially expanded to include Richland County in 2008 when we met our first landowner who was interested in protecting their land through a conservation easement. So since 2008, we have completed 4 projects, and 3 of those have occurred in the past 2 years. So right now we are actively looking for new opportunities to meet landowners in Richland County and protect more land in Richland County. So our very first conservation easement was protected in 2008, working with a landowner to protect their 40 acres of scenic blufflands, forests, and grasslands. The aerial photo in the bottom left corner shows this property. It's in the northwest portion of Richland County, and it consists of prominent ridgetops, rugged ravines, beautiful oak forests, and surrogate grasslands. The next property was protected in 2021 for 60 acres of forests, prairies, sedge meadows, and springs in the Kickapoo River Valley. I believe this property is also in the northwest corner of the county, and the landowners came to us as well to create a conservation easement. That photo is in the top right, and that shows their beautiful restored prairie with blooming blazing stars and milkweeds and coneflowers with their barn in the background. So in the same year, in 2021, we also worked with a landowner along Little Fancy Creek to protect 180 acres of their amazing working farmlands. So they have open pastures, forests, dry cliffs, and sedge meadows along Little Fancy Creek. And that photo is in the bottom right, showing their sweeping pastures. They carefully manage their farmlands to maintain their productive agricultural soils, and their easement also protects their property from subdivision and from development of prime farmlands in Richland County. So then last year, we met Marilyn Hauk, and she approached us to protect her land. Amazing 993 acres of working farmlands, wooded blufflands, and high-quality wetlands with a mile of frontage along Fancy Creek. So we were absolutely thrilled when Marilyn approached us about conserving her land with conservation easement. Not only did it present an opportunity for the Conservancy's largest ever conservation easement, but it was also a wonderful example of the power of land protection, because it is an example site for working farmlands, diverse wildlife habitats, and wetland restoration along Fancy Creek. Maryland's property includes farmlands with conservation practices of no-till, contour farming, pollinator plantings, and many others. So her fields have soils that are designated as farmlands of statewide importance, and her conservation practices ensure that they remain healthy and intact. So her farm serves as a really nice demonstration site for a lot of these land management practices, especially with her partnership to restore Fancy Creek, which she shared a little bit about. So our next slide is about this Fancy Creek restoration process, which is a place-based project where Maryland has partnered with the Wisconsin Wetlands Association, local municipalities, and conservation departments to undertake the restoration of Fancy Creek and reconnect it with the original meander channels and the original floodplain. This project will serve as an amazing demonstration for floodwater mitigation strategies, because the creek, as she talked about earlier, was historically ditched, and the Fancy Creek will try to get back into those meander channels, which will improve water quality, wildlife biodiversity, and habitat functionality of those wetlands. This will also improve the ability for the watershed to handle unusually high floodwaters and extreme historic rainfall events. So we are very much aware of the flooding issues that occurred in Richland Center after working with those landowners in the 2021 easement. So we are very excited about this project and how Maryland's land can help prevent floods downstream of Fancy Creek. So a story about this was published in the Wisconsin Wetlands Association quarterly newsletter, and it is also in our Conservancy materials that we have with us today. So, none of the work we would do would be possible without 25 years of support from our members, our volunteers, businesses, partners, landowners, all working together with us to save the Driftless. So we take great joy in working together with these communities, and we are always looking for new ways to connect with more people. So, if anyone here would like to get involved, we have many, many opportunities to connect with us and connect with the places that we protect. Whether it's joining us for a hike on our Link to the Land program, which are guided, themed hikes that occur throughout the year at many properties and in all 9 of our counties, or the Trail Check Challenge program, which we have a brochure about, which is kind of a fun event where you can visit all of our properties and have a chance to win some prizes. So we also have volunteer opportunities to join us in the field for those land habitat restoration work days, or we have volunteer opportunities for our events or even office work as well. We have materials with us today about those events and our membership program. So as a nonprofit, funding is always a limiting factor. So your support truly does enable the work that we do, and we would love to talk to you about opportunities and ways to engage with people more in Richland County. Because together, we're saving the Driftless for them. So thank you for inviting us to present today. Our contact information is located down there on that slide, but we can share it with you because that's a little small. And we would love to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
And we have time. We have plenty of time, for questions and answers to either Sarah, Connor, or Marilyn. And the lights are going to go up here in a couple of seconds. So.
Hi, what's your question?
Do you receive any state, federal, or local funding from local government, state government, anything?
We do not. The only state or government funding we receive is occasionally in the form of a grant to help with a land acquisition. But no, we are funded by members and donors.
I have a question for Connor. Sure. Connor, obviously you're the youngest guy in the room. So my question is, what is your educational background, your personal background that got you into this position?
That is a great question, and I get asked it a lot. I think I would start by a little bit like Marilyn. I grew up in downtown Chicago, middle of the city. But because of that, and because of my parents and my family, I was always drawn to outside of the city, to nature, to the natural world, and I quickly picked up on the conservation field as opportunities for education and my graduate or undergraduate and graduate programs. And pretty much from leaving high school, I started on a path to study conservation and to look for careers in land protection, really. So I started quite early, and it took me many years to find a good path, and kind of traveled around the United States, working a lot in the field with habitat restoration, was introduced to land trust in 2019 through an AmeriCorps program. And then when COVID hit, I went back to graduate school and then applied for Mississippi Valley Conservancy after that. Yeah, I went to UW-Madison studying conservation biology, environmental conservation, environmental studies, a lot of coursework with the Nelson Institute for undergrad and for a one-year master's program.
Impressive, thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Yes,
I live in Grant County.
yes, we love Grant County.
Are you guys working in Grant County?
Yes, we are. I'm trying to think of specific properties, but, well, one is the one I was mentioning to you. We have one situation that's in, near Fenimore, where we have a public property that we protect. It's kind of a complicated one. It's a partnership with another land trust. And then as a private conservation easement, we own the farmland that surrounds it. So that's kind of a unique one. But yeah, we do have projects in progress in Grant County too. I'm sure we have more easements in Grant County, but I just don't know where they are.
Yeah, we have several conservation easements. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I would say it's probably probably around 20 easements in Grant County or more. Cassville Bluffs State Natural Area is one of our nature preserves there, as well as Devil's Backbone.
Would you use the microphone, please?
Sorry, yeah, good idea. Devil's Backbone is one, and Cassville Bluffs is another in Grant County. More information on those is on our website as well for all of our properties in Grant County.
And then some private easements.
And conservation easements.
Yeah,
When it gets to invasive species,
yes.
what can you do, what do you do about that?
We do a lot of invasive species work. Our land management team is working on invasives pretty much every week. And the practices that you use to manage them and remove them kind of varies throughout the year. Right now in the summer, they were working on garlic mustard in the spring, and now they're working on a lot of the flowering forbs that invade prairies such as sweet clover, crown vetch, and others. We do a lot of invasive brush removal, working on honeysuckle, buckthorn, autumn olive, using brush saws and herbicide. We do spring and fall burn seasons to keep up with invasives, and in the winter we do a lot of chainsaw work.
And then in the spring, we do burns. There's a whole season of prescribed burning where a lot of the winter work is preparing for the burns, and because they're all trained on how to conduct these managed fires, where a prairie is burned in the spring, and that gives the native plants a head start, and they actually win out over the invasive species that summer.
How close do you get to multiflora rose?
We do a lot of work with multiflora rose as well. I know I haven't been out with them this spring yet. It's because I work on the land protection side with conservation easements a lot. And we also have our intern crews available to our conservation easement landowners, so they can apply to have our intern crews come out for days during the summer to help with, say, a big patch of multiflora rose. And the intern teams will work to remove those. Yeah.
That's all volunteers.
No, we actually have an endowment that pays our intern crew every summer. This year we have 6 interns, and they're paid, it is kind of a minimum wage, but they're paid, and most of them are students in biology from the university system, and they learn a lot. They love it. It's hard work, but they learn a lot from our staff about land management. I also wanted to mention, Connor mentioned, we do use some herbicides, but we're extremely conservative about how we use herbicides. I mean, we literally only use an herbicide on one plant at a time. So if we lop off a multiflora rose, we treat the stump of just that rose. We're not doing any broad spraying or anything like that.
And only invasives.
Right. Yes.
Are you a part of the Driftless Area Land Conservancy, or are you a separate?
We're a separate one. As Paul mentioned, I think it was you who mentioned there are 40 land trusts in Wisconsin. And the Driftless Land Trust, I think that's what, the Driftless Land Conservancy, is that what you're referring to?
No, Driftless Area Land Conservancy.
Yeah, Driftless Area Land Conservancy is their full name.
That's their name, yeah, yeah. But we are, you know, one of the great things about the land trusts in Wisconsin is that we are all working toward the same mission. And we're all part of an organization called Gathering Waters. There's that beautiful newspaper article that you showed me. It was recently in the Richland Observer. Gathering Waters is a statewide alliance of all the land trusts in Wisconsin. And we don't consider each other competitors. We learn from each other. We share everything with each other. We borrow ideas, and you know, that keeps us all performing at our highest. Yes?
Okay, so you have all this land that's in conservancy.
Yes.
I'm not a hunter, but what about hunters? If they say, hey, can we access that land to harvest deer, whatever, turkey?
Well, the big difference there, thank you for asking that question. The big difference there is the public protected land versus the private protected land. In the case of the private landowners, it's entirely up to them. I mean, just because we protect Maryland's land doesn't mean that anyone can go hunting on Maryland's land. However, we have these 25 nature preserves, and on all but one or two of them, hunting is allowed. And that's, in fact, that's mandated by the state in a lot of cases.
So Maryland could post their land as no hunting?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's private property. It's totally up to her. Paul?
In the crowd today, we have a real, working, live district administrator from North Crawford School District here. And he's not retiring, he told me. So if he wanted to have you come to North Crawford to give this a very similar presentation, or maybe he would go back to his elementary teachers and say, here's a field trip. How would he do that?
Oh, he would contact me or anyone in our organization, and we would love that. We love having opportunities like this, we also have, as Connor mentioned, we have a hiking program. Our guided hikes are free and open to the public, and those are sprinkled around the 9-county area, and the schedule of those is on our events calendar on our website. Our website, which is simply, well, it's long, but it's easy to remember. It's MississippiValleyConservancy.org. So you can find out about our hikes there. And we also have volunteer days. Sometimes businesses actually like to give their employees a day of doing something for the community out in the field. And we've had a number of businesses contact us about doing volunteer work days. I think you mentioned volunteers, and I overlooked addressing that. In addition to these 6 summer interns, we have a volunteer program year-round. We just had a tree planting up in Trempealeau about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had over 100 volunteers come, and they helped us plant 1,500 trees in a day and a half. It was incredible. And that was on one of the nature preserves that we own and protect. So that we can kind of craft opportunities for groups that want to do things. You know, if a church group wanted to volunteer, we would be happy to think of a way, or a school group, yeah, we'd be happy to think of projects or possibly even a hike. Yes?
Okay, you know,
interested in this?
There are tax incentives, although there's no one answer to that question. It does vary based on people's financial situation. It doesn't affect property taxes, but there is potential for a sizable income tax deduction based on the value of your property and how that compares to its potential value that you've actually given up by putting it into a conservation easement. So, I mean, Maryland's land might be worth 10 times as much if it was a housing development, but the difference in those two amounts is what's potentially a tax write-off. But again, it depends on your situation, and we look at each situation individually, and ultimately it's up to the landowner and their financial advisor to determine how that works for them.
I will guide you for the last question. Let's say I don't have any land, but maybe I've got money. How do I get you money to support what you're doing? How do I do that?
Well, the easiest way is to pick up almost any one of those pieces of literature back there. There's an envelope in almost every one of those brochures back there. And so that's one really easy way. But we also have a lot of fun ways to give money too. We have a fantastic auction every fall in La Crosse, and we also have, donors who contribute to endowments or set up a fund. So there are a lot of ways.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Marilyn has a question.
I have a really big question. I need volunteers. When you mentioned about a burn, I need to burn. I need burning on my pollinators. I've got 32 acres of pollinator land that need to be burned. Second, in the pollinator area, I was just up in my 13-acre pollinator place yesterday with my little tiny chainsaw to cut down a great big horrible honeysuckle thing. While I was cutting it down, I saw a thistle. I need help with thistles. And I mean, you can come out to my place. I can drive you someplace with a mule, the dogs would have to ride with you too because I have 3 dogs. And they pile in, they know exactly where to sit. I need some volunteer help. One of my goals with the wetland process was that it could be a lab. I was hoping for the college kids to be able to come out and learn about wetlands. That's probably not going to happen thanks to Platteville shooting us in the foot. But anyway, I was hoping that it could be a laboratory to learn about the plants and about the Blandings turtles. I know Blandings turtles are in my wetland. I've seen them there. But maybe even high school could help me. But how can I get to the high school authorities to allow students to come and help in a wetland? So if you've got ideas about volunteering, just kind of let me know or let Sarah and Connor know. Thanks so much.
And Marilyn, be sure and sign up for the intern crew.
Yes, I didn't know about that.
Yeah. At
Where
this
do I
point,
sign up?
you probably have to wait until next year, but you'll get a letter. You'll get a letter toward the end of the year offering you to sign up.
Okay.
We'll tell you more about that.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you'll enjoy Thunderfest this weekend or whatever else you choose to do. And we'll see you next week right here at Our Town.